Tax Lien Explained, simple and clear so that you can go ahead and get started with this business today with a simple understanding of tax liens, what they are, and how they work. So I want to dive into this because for folks who are just getting started with tax lien and deed investing, it can be confusing. And even to this day, after 20 years and you have people researching it, one of the fundamentals to understand is, first off, what is the difference between a tax lien and a tax deed? So we really need to get this clear. So with a tax lien, you're not actually buying the property. What you're doing, in fact, is you are lending the local county government money so that they can go ahead and operate their local infrastructure for paying their taxes or for paying like school teachers and roads and things like that, right? So remember this. There are 3,300 called a tax lien state. Half of them are what's called a tax deed state. So in a tax lien state, you are not actually buying the property. Okay, so let's start out with fundamental number one, which is in a tax lien state, you do not own the property. You make your interest rate of anywhere between 8 to 36% interest. All right. Second half of this is the tax deed states. In a tax deed state, you actually can buy the property for the outstanding back taxes owed. So those are the cut and dry, clean and clear things to keep in mind. So for most people watching this, you're either living in a tax deed state or a tax lien state. However, there are a few what we call hybrid states. And a hybrid state does both tax lien and tax deed. So for example, a place like Florida is a hybrid state. They do tax liens, but they also do tax deeds. So to simplify that even more, a hybrid state does both tax liens and tax deeds. Now there's only a couple of these, like Arizona, Illinois, can't remember the other one, but there's only a few of them. So odds are you're living in either a lien or a deed state. So that is the first thing to realize. And these fundamentals are super important to go through because you wouldn't believe how many folks I talk to. They've been interested for years, but they're not exactly clear on the differences. And what I love about tax lien and deed investing is the fact that not a lot of people know about it. And the reason not a lot of people know about the business is because there's no incentives for third parties to come in and make a profit. So for example, if you're a mortgage broker or you're flipping a house, there is room for third parties to come and make money off you. So, the mortgage broker gets their cut for doing your mortgage. The realtor gets their cut. The title company gets their cut. With tax liens and deeds, nobody can come and get a cut. You're dealing directly with the county. So the reason that a lot of people don't understand, for a beginner, like what is a lien and how does it work, is because there's no big multi-billion-dollar industry propping it up, incentivizing people to learn about it. And that's a good thing for you as an investor. So let's cover more of the basics for a beginner in a tax lien state. So in a tax lien state, you're going to get an interest rate. The key thing to keep in mind is you are not buying a property in a tax lien state. You are lending the local county government basically money to operate. So the homeowner in a tax lien state, every year they are delinquent, will have to pay an interest rate. Okay. So that interest rate, like I mentioned, anywhere between 8 to 36% on the tax lien. So the key thing to keep in mind that also comes up, people will say, well, a couple things. One, do I deal with the homeowner when I buy a tax lien certificate? And the answer to that question is no. And this is another reason why I like tax liens, is because the county government deals with the homeowner and sends the notices. So they basically almost are like your employee in this situation. Imagine them almost like your assistant, because they're sending the notices, sending everything to make that homeowner pay their property. Now, when you go and buy a tax lien, let's say, for example, in Arizona, generally in a tax lien state, the interest rate is bid down. So, for example, Maricopa County in Phoenix just had their auction, and there's tens of thousands of tax liens that they're selling, and the opening interest rate is 16%, and it will get bid down. So for example, one of the big things is banks are one of the biggest investors in tax liens. And sometimes you'll see a banker just like sitting in the front row, spending, $1 million of your money in the bank while they pay you nothing, making an interest rate. Now, the question comes, well, like, oh, 5% is not that much. But the thing is there's so many of these liens, there's plenty of opportunity to get that full interest rate. And there's always thousands of these liens that don't get sold. And you can actually go there today and buy those liens, what's called over the counter, and get that full interest rate. Now, you might have to sort through them a little bit, but they're definitely there. So for those of you guys just tuning in or maybe finding this video, I'm Dustin Hahn, tax lien and deed expert. I've been doing this stuff like 20 years, wrote one of the best-selling books called The ABCs of Tax Lien and Deed Investing. Over 60,000 copies of this thing sold. I give it away on my site and in the link below. So if you're new, you can ask a question in the comments. We'll get to that. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you're liking it and subscribe. That way we can make sure folks are getting the answers to these questions as well. So coming back to it, what I love about liens is the classic. They're safe, secure, and predictable. So as a beginner, you need to understand why tax liens are so safe. They've been around over 200 years. They're one of the oldest investments in America to date. Think of how many investments out there are backed and secured by real estate and backed by the US government, right? That's why I love this business. So when it's time for the homeowner to redeem, they go into the county office or do it online, and they have to pay the interest rate that was agreed upon. And the big question that comes up a lot is like, well, what happens if that homeowner doesn't redeem? Well, this is where you can get those big home runs that you see about quite a bit, where people get, $100,000 property for a few $1,000s. Because remember, the tax lien is always going to be a small fraction of the value of the property. So what happens in a tax lien state is if that homeowner goes, say, 3 years and they don't pay you, then you will have the ability to foreclose on that property. And keep in mind that the tax lien is always the priority lien, and it wipes out everything that is above it. Okay, so 95% of the time, you're going to get your interest rate of 18 to 24, even 36%, depending on where it is. And then from there, if you don't, you can foreclose and get a huge home run, which is great. So it's really a win-win situation. As far as the worst case scenario for a tax lien is also one of the best case scenarios for you in this situation. And remember, it's a numbers game. A lot of people will say, well, why would a property go to the auction or allow you to foreclose on it? Well, remember, some of these properties might not have mortgages. And remember, the people who work at the banks are also human beings as well. They make mistakes. They have the paperwork on their desk. They've been notified that, hey, you're going to foreclose. Now, the other basic to keep in mind with a tax lien is this. Some places might have a 2-year redemption. Some places might have a 3-year redemption. And what that means is in a place that has a 2-year redemption, that means that you can go ahead and start your foreclosure proceeding after 2 years. If it's 3 years, you're going to have to wait 3 years. Now, the other thing to keep in mind as well is generally it is the first year that has the priority of foreclosing. So for example, year 1, and then they don't pay their taxes for 2 more consecutive years. Now, you can come and you can also buy and bid the following years as well. But year 1 is often the golden spot because it allows you to foreclose. Now, there are some counties that make the 3rd year the one that is able to foreclose. So they kind of encourage you to keep buying them in that situation. Now, there's a few strategies. Like if you really want to foreclose and get properties, what you can do is you can go and find over-the-counter liens that are available today that maybe they've been sitting in inventory for years, and you can start that foreclosure process, literally within the next couple weeks. Now, it's going to require a little more elbow grease. So coming back to the basics of this stuff, remember, tax lien, you own the property, you get the interest rate. Tax deed, you own the property. Or sorry, tax lien, you don't own the property. Tax deed is where you buy the property for the back taxes. So I think it's very important to study the fundamentals of this, because at first it can seem complicated. However, you need to look at this stuff almost like the game of Monopoly, right? 3,300 counties, half are lien, half are deed. You take your rules and you go figure out basically how to play the game in that county, okay? Or maybe a better analogy is you take the board and then you go figure out how to play that game in that county, all right? Now, you could literally get started today buying these liens dirt cheap and call yourself a real estate investor by the end of the day. You can go onto the Arizona website or a website in Florida and buy some of these liens, even if it's only like 20 or 30 bucks. You're making an interest rate. It's a very low risk, and you can call yourself a real estate investor by the end of the day. So those are the basic fundamentals to get out of the way. So from here, you need to decide your next steps in this business, right? How much money, a couple questions. One, what's your risk tolerance? Two, how much money do you have set aside for investing? For example, if you have $1,000, probably liens aren't going to make you rich, because, even 18% on $1,000, you will need the elixir of life to really be able to, make that interest rate. A better way is like, if you have $1,000, flip some cheap tax deeds, and then that way you'll be able to turn that money over and buy property, flip it, and then put it into liens. So if you're here right now and you're trying to figure out, all right, what's the best spot for me to get started, what we do here is, other than obviously making videos, we also help people get started. So if you want to do a free 4-step investment plan, you can go ahead. There's a link below and you can book a call with us. And basically what we'll do is we'll do a one-on-one conversation and we'll build you a 4-step investment plan. And basically these are our steps for scaling. And they're 4 steps that when put together, you can have a huge advantage in this business and really get out on the right foot. And there'll also be a link to the free book if you want. I give this thing away now to just provide value to our community. The book has, all of the, the ins and the outs. And I also have another bonus here. You get these on demand. So anybody who books a call also gets these. It's funny because these are still on like DVDs, but the content is awesome. And I think I'll leave it at one more thing that you'll get: 100 tax lien and deed facts. If you want to book a call, you get all that, or there's a link on our website to just go and get it all for free. So thanks a lot for watching. Make sure if you have questions, put them in the comments and I'll try to make a video on them or answer them. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.